Welcome to Chalk Dust, the podcast that gives you a front row seat into some of the best classrooms in the world. I'm Rebecca Birch.
And I'm Nathaniel Swain.
I'm the academic in residence at a girls' school in Sydney and a practicing English teacher. I'm currently studying towards a PhD on the link between explicit teaching and non-academic outcomes.
And I'm a teacher and teacher educator, and I've previously worked as a classroom teacher in primary school settings around Melbourne. I've had the great pleasure of working with schools all around the country on their instructional practice and school improvement.
There are lots of great conversations about teaching and education happening around the world right now. And Nathaniel and I are well known for getting right down into the nitty-gritty of classroom instruction.
There are already so many fantastic podcasts out there about evidence-based practice, and we're so excited to bring you one more with a little twist.
Each episode, Nathaniel and I break down real classroom footage and try to illuminate the moments that make great teaching great.
Teaching is both a science and an art. There are some proven techniques that we know to work, but applying them in real classrooms is where the complexity lies. That's where we come in.
Today we have a very special guest with us, Manisha Gazula, who's principal of Marsden Road Public School. Manisha, would you like to tell us a little bit about the school's context and background and where the school began versus where it is now?
Good morning, Rebecca, and good morning, Nathaniel. So I'm principal of Marsden Road Public School. I started here in 2016. And if for people who don't know where Liverpool is, it is in Sydney Southwest, and it is in a low SES suburb. 90% of our kids come from a language background other than English, with 65% of those kids speaking English for fewer than 3 years. If I enroll 100 kindergarten kids, 65% of those kids probably would be speaking English only since they have gone to preschool, if at all, if they go to preschool. So it is, they do come with very little knowledge of English language. About 20% of our kids come from a refugee background. And some of these kids have not been to school at all, even if they are 8 or 9 or 10 years old. So I've had kids enroll at my school who have been in a refugee camp for 2 or 3 years and then come to a school. So they've never been to a school in their country, even had seen a book. We also have kids who carry a lot of emotional baggage because it is a very transient population. In a given year, the average number of students who will leave my school is between 80 to 90. And that's the same number of kids that I would enroll. So if I have 30 classes, you're looking at every term, 3 or 4 kids leaving and 3 new kids coming in. So it is transient, and it adds to the complexity of the class. But it is what it is. That's the nature of the suburb. My school is not unique in the sense. I'm sure the schools around me are in the same boat. But being the largest school in Liverpool, we do get a very large number of those refugee students compared to other schools. It has actually become more complex. The social dynamics have changed. We are getting more students from Middle East and Northern Africa. Even then, when we'd had not as many kids from refugee background or from humble beginnings, our results were really very low. Average number of students who are gaining proficiency, and I always talk about proficiency because I do not believe in minimum standards, was about 6 or 7% in writing.
Wow.
Similar in reading, and about, I would say, sometimes even 4% in maths.
Wow.
So we were sending kids to high school. In every 100 kids, we were sending probably 5 kids who were able to access high school curriculum. So the standards were really low when I first started in Marsden Road Public School, and it has drastically changed in the last 9 years. And a lot of it has got to do with how we teach and what we teach.
And so teachers are making a big difference at Marsden Road. And I think your results, as you've spoken about on so many fantastic podcasts and other forums before, really do speak for themselves. I guess the listeners of this podcast will be interested to know what would they be looking for in the classrooms and what would they see on a daily basis to get that kind of results. And explicit instruction is obviously a big picture idea, but also it's that daily phonics teaching as well that makes a big difference for that decoding ability, doesn't it?
Correct. I mean, reading forms the basis of all learning. So unless children can read, they're not going to be able to understand anything else, because knowledge has to come, and that comes from reading, listening, hearing, and it has to come before the skills. When you come to our school, what you would see is, I know you asked me the question about phonics, but phonics is a part of the 5 elements of reading. And reading is, as I said, forms the basis of what we teach. But it's not just that. Even to be able to read, if I talk about something and you get a tier 3 vocabulary, you're going to not, even if you understood 9 words out of that in that sentence, if I throw in a vocabulary that you're unfamiliar with and it's a tier 3 vocabulary, you're going to lose the meaning of it. So that is also very important. We give them knowledge. So we build knowledge into our students through morning routine, where we front load them with a lot of information, a lot of the things that they probably other kids would get through experiences that they have in life, but our children don't have that. So we front load them. So for example, if I'm teaching about Japan, I'll be front loading a lot of information about Japan to them, so then they can use that when they're reading a book on Japan or when they're writing on Japan. So it's not, and that happens across K to 6. Every class has to do it. So what you will see, Nathaniel, when you come to my school is that sometimes people feel that it might be a bit regimented, but it is not. It's called consistency. I don't want there to be any gaps in the learning of students. So there's consistency, such as the routines and the structures that happens across the school. Everything is K to 6. It is what we have established, a culture in our school where we understand the science of learning, the science of reading, and we understand that each one of us has to be consistent. So when you come to our school, what you see is more or less similar sort of teaching. The content is the same across the stage. Differentiation happens in the classroom as the teacher teaches. Well, there's a scope and sequence for everything.
So today we're looking at 3 teachers in the phonics and decoding part of the lesson as part of their literacy block at Marsden Road. We're going to see Olivera and we're going to see Lisa and Rebecca in action. So Rebecca, if we have secondary teachers or people who don't regularly teach literacy tuning in, what can they hope to get out of today's episode?
And one of the things that struck me was that kindergartners can handle a really high pace. They can handle meta language. I was really impressed by that. And I think secondary teachers, when secondary teachers see this, they're going to see that sometimes I think in secondary, we set a lower bar than we do for kindergartners when it comes to routine and response rates and things like that. So even the amount of examples that students are exposed to in a short session, I think secondary teachers can take a lot of inspiration from that. But I think if you're in secondary and you're an English teacher or a literacy leader in particular, you probably are aware of this, but secondary teachers don't get any training in science of reading. And so it's really good to see actually what happens in a kindergarten lesson. And it sort of demystifies how did they get to this skill of reading. The other thing that I think is really valuable for secondary teachers and people that work in learning support is that we can see that there's a limit on our expertise, right? So if we have a student that comes to us that's unable to decode, we can see how, skilled these kindergarten teachers are and how technical their knowledge is. And we can sort of feel reassured that perhaps we don't have the expertise to deal with that, and we know who to approach about how to help these students. And we don't feel that pressure to be able to teach them decoding in their secondary classroom.
You said that, secondary teachers may feel that they may not have the expertise. Can I begin by saying that primary teachers also did not have those expertise? No one taught them at university as to how to teach phonics.
This is true.
Exactly. And we have been teaching phonics at the school since 2016. But I know it has been now, only in the last couple of years that, the science of reading has finally won the war, and people understand that we have to teach phonics and that it is being rolled out across Australia, I hope.
Awesome. Let's jump in and look at Olivera to begin with, and then we'll have a chat.
Now I need your eyes to this board. Eyes to the board, because we are going to do some blending. Okay, so we're going to blend some words using our new phonemes. We are learning to blend words to read. We can read at least 8 new words today. And we're going to do this together. Okay, our first phoneme, what's our B? What's this phoneme in? Good. B. Say B. Good job. I, short vowel, I. Let's blend these two first. Go. B. Now let's add our last phoneme. What's our last? G. Let's join them together. Ready to blend? Big. Squash it. What's the word? Big. Good job. There is our picture for big. All right. Next phoneme. What? D. What's this phoneme? Good job. D. What's in the middle? Oh, let's blend them together. Da. What's our last phoneme? Let's blend them all together now. Ready? Dog. Squash the word. Dog. What's the word?
Dog.
What's the word?
Dog.
What's the word? Dog. What's the word?
Just jumping in quickly there because I got so much out of that little sample. I think it's really clear how, although you've got a whole group working, you can see so much focus and so much opportunities for students to get the maximum amount of practice in that sample we had there. So you could hear a pin drop with the amount of focus in that room of kindergarten students. There's also a really quick transition between the words. So there's not a large sort of waiting time for students to get that extra practice. And the other thing I really love is that there's lots of individual practice as well as group practice. So you're doing it together chorally, but then Olivera's calling upon students for that check for listening or check for individual practice in the middle of it, which I thought was awesome.
So Manish, just on that, what Nathaniel's talking about with pace and, not having too much gap between exposures to letters, what supports does the school put in place to get teachers to that level? So what do you do to actually get your teachers up to speed with the pace that's expected at Marsden Road?
So what we did was we engaged an expert, and I still use an expert who I knew had the knowledge and the skills, and teach my teachers like as if they were new learners of phonics. And that still happens continuous, and it's ongoing. It's an induction program. We teach teachers, and it includes the pace. So there's lots of modeling. We have a scope and sequence for the way we teach phonics. We have the activities ready. We are well resourced because creating the resource was important. So there's a lot of prep that has gone into it. But today, both Lisa and Olivera have been with me since 2016. And so has Rebecca. So you're seeing 3 teachers who have been trained really well. So that's important. The coaching, the training, the scope and sequence, the resources, a lot of modeling, a lot of feedback through observation and things like that. And that's how we get there.
And I noticed as well, like the classroom routines and expectations that allow all of that great teaching to happen without disruption and without people getting off task and enabling the teacher to keep the students focused for long enough to get enough repetition and practice. Some people might look at this and be like, oh, how does this lead to fluent reading? Because if you haven't seen a lot of phonics teaching, you're thinking, wow, there's a lot of exercises on things that are quite small.
Yes.
But, the analogy that I love is if you're thinking about piano scales or if you're thinking about drills in a particular sport, they don't look like the final product, but they are the prerequisites, practice and feedback that learners in this novice stage really need. What I loved as well is that the letter tiles and the whiteboards were ready to go. So students were about to use those to practice the spelling and choosing which graphemes to represent those phonemes. But they weren't distracted by them at that moment. So the routines were really strong.
And we were talking earlier, Manisha, about what we don't see in that classroom, and we don't see a lot of fiddling. We don't see a lot of, pen lids clicking and students grabbing materials off the floor.
That's right.
Nathaniel and I were talking about all the annoying sounds that teachers have to put up with in the classroom, so I think it's such a great, thing to lower the teacher's level of, cognitive load as well, not to have all those little hands moving everywhere like little octopuses.
And calling out and, disruptions for various reasons.
Correct.
These things are the reality in most primary school classrooms, but they don't have to be if you have strong routines and strong expectations and set students up for success. Actually teaching explicitly rather than assuming they know how to sit and to focus for a period of time.
Even for early career teachers, if they go and do an observation, making a list of what they're not seeing could be just as valuable as having a checklist of good practice that they, that they should be seeing. So I think that's
Absolutely.
Yeah, even in secondary. Let's take a look at Lisa's classroom.
Listen to how I read like a river. Ready? Eyes track with me. The sneaky crook took all the gold. Your turn.
The sneaky crook took all the gold.
Good. What's a crook?
Crook is like a thief.
Yeah, bad person. Very good. Okay, my turn. Ready? We like to go to the beach on sunny days.
We like to go to the beach on sunny days.
Good. Front row. Ready? We like to go. Your turn. We like to go to the beach on sunny days. Good job. Here's me at the beach on a sunny day. In morning routine, though, we've been talking about this because sometimes when it's sunny, can I go to the beach? Why not?
Because sometimes the water might be cold.
Sometimes it's sunny, but it's cold. Okay, so we need to think about what the temperature is as well.
When I see this, I don't see necessarily just the reading of sentences. I see a lot of meaning making by the teacher, so linking to other things that students know about and have learned about at school. And I think there's this misconception with secondary teachers especially, that phonics is just about letter sound correspondence and there's no room for meaning making. So Manisha, what are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, that's a misconception. A big misconception is phonics is not about just sound correspondence. It's about decoding. It's about, and as I said before, phonics is one of the 5 elements that constitutes how children learn. So there's a science to it. It's not just about getting children to, what Rebecca was doing, sounding, making the understanding. It is understanding which phoneme goes with which sound and how do I represent that and how do I decode it. It's about the morphology as well. So we teach our students how to take a noun and convert and make it into plural, the suffixes, the prefixes, all that falls more phonics. So phonics is simply not about just, CVC words. That is biggest misconception. And they're not sitting there in year 4 doing CVC words. They're sitting there and adding prefixes and suffixes and understanding how this word can be morphed into something else. That is, and for that we also use a lot of decodables. Because decodable books make meaning. You not only decode the words, but you're also finding meaning in those sentences, in those words. And we use a lot of decodables across our schools. We have moved away from PM benchmarking because that doesn't do anything for at least in the early years of our school. So we use decodables that not only can help students understand phonics, but also help them derive meaning from what they're reading. So it is all done through a phonics lesson. In fact, it doesn't make sense without having any meaning to a lesson.
I also noticed the use of the front row reading and middle row and then back row, for example. So ways of activating different parts of the room when you're doing choral reading. I think a lot of teachers are experimenting with how they get sort of information across, and they might rely too much on just one form over the other. I think what's shown here and that you can use in any sort of kind of teaching is that you can mix up who's responding at which time.
Exactly, yes. And that's what you're doing, all this checking for understanding, you're doing ritual practice, you're differentiating. Because when you're teaching, a good teacher knows how to differentiate while teaching.
Yes.
As you go, then reacting to what's happening in the classroom instead of following a script. So the teacher can have direct vision onto their board and what they're doing. And I can say back row, you can add another adjective to that sentence, have a complex sentence or a compound sentence. And we do that in a year 1 or a year 2 class. So that's okay. And that's
making that connection to differentiation by support rather than, you've got a different lesson. So you're giving them access to that main lesson, which is so important.
Correct. Exactly.
Tony Hatton-Roberts kind of warns against overuse of choral responses. She calls it a goldfishing when students just move their lips,
Correct.
open and shut. And you do see that, I think, in secondary as well. They get very well trained as to, they're able to train themselves in how not to participate. So you got to be really careful that we don't have, a row of goldfish.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest concern I have too, that sometimes people just take a strategy and they just do it without really understanding the purpose behind the strategy, because then you're just going through the motions without really achieving anything.
Yeah, I think that's a really big takeaway for me as well from the clip so far, is that there is a repertoire that they're drawing upon. And I think hopefully no one would get the impression that teachers have to teach in one specific way. There is obviously some principles and practices that underlie all of these instructional decisions that they're making, but they're still making those decisions in real time. As you said, they're not working from a lesson that they cannot deviate from. They've got routines that they can use, and depending what the students do, they make different choices.
Absolutely, yes. And only a teacher who knows the content and only a teacher who knows the pedagogy can do that. If you don't know the content, if you don't know the pedagogy, then you are a little bit stuck, and then you follow a script, or you just follow through the motions of doing something because you think, oh, I've seen the other teacher do that, so that's how I'm supposed to do this lesson, and you just follow the actions.
Yeah, understanding the reason why you're doing it and how it
The
can
purpose,
improve.
exactly.
How to look out for,
Correct.
whether your kids are on the right track. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay, let's watch Rebecca in action.
Note. Oh, my turn. Note, slide, my turn. Just waiting. Going to go again. Note, slide, came, flute, theme. Your turn.
No slide came flute theme.
My turn. Here we go. Rose, white, flame, June, Pete.
Rose,
not red row anymore. This row. You ready? Nice and fast. Go.
Glow migration deep.
You can go faster.
Froze dry brave ULDs.
Okay, this side here. Are you ready? Let's go with this. Go.
Note, slide, cane, flute, theme.
Oh, we got tricked. Note, slide, cane, flute, theme. Again.
Note, slide, cane, flute, theme.
Note. What is this word?
No.
Note. Excellent. Don't forget
What
that.
strikes me about this clip is that it's really at a cracking pace, and this teacher is after perfection before she moves on. She's got really high expectations for every student, and I think that's really different to the secondary classroom where there's lots of fuzzy edges around routines.
Yes.
Nothing's quite clean. The starts of the lesson are not quite clean. So I just wondered, Nathaniel, what's the risk of letting things go a bit sloppy in terms of routine and participation?
I think a lot of teachers are thinking about this once they begin that work on higher expectations with how students are responding. And Manisha, I'd love your thoughts on this, but my always thinking is that if you let it go to 95% and then 90%, it only takes a few days or a week or two for it to slip down to 80 and 75.
And you may as well not have a routine by that point. You've got 30% of your kids who are not in a routine.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because you let things slide and you give in to every little thing. Kids don't know the boundaries. And honestly, if you have to maintain any kind of fidelity in the lesson, if you want to really get something out of a lesson, pace is important. Even as an adult, if you're learning something and something it's too slow for you, you're going to lose interest. If it's too fast for you, you're just going to give up. But how do you then maintain that pace in the lesson that is then helping the students who are struggling or need support? And how is it then helping the students at the back? You saw this teacher doing it really, really well. The pace was enough to keep the interest and the structure without losing the control of what's happening in the classroom. And also, this comes with practice. It doesn't come I don't expect a 21-year-old teacher to come and teach like Rebecca and have that kind of pace and understanding. Again, pedagogy, experience, content knowledge, also all very important. I've seen a lot of things happening at school where the teacher will say, now Matthew, put that away, still waiting for you. Yes, we are all waiting. No, you don't wait. Because what happens to little Tommy who's ready to go, he loses interest. So it is something
that's true.
to do deliberately. It's purposeful, it's deliberate, it's intentional. And again, you as a teacher, as a beginning teacher or someone who's new to our school may find it a little bit tricky in the beginning because they have to think to be that way. But eventually you figure it out and it becomes, again, for the teacher, the teaching becomes second nature too.
What strikes me about these slides is that they look really resource intensive, right? So to teach this volume of work, it's like a secondary teacher's nightmare to have to produce that level of work.
Correct. Yes.
There's this really pervasive idea that it's part of teachers' craft and identity to create all their own materials. I feel like I already know how you're going to feel about this, but I'm going to ask you to talk to our podcast listeners about it anyway.
Sure. I don't think teachers have to create the content. Content is already there. There is a way phonics has to be taught. Phonics, reading is a science. Phonics is an important part of that science. So obviously phonics is science. You can't create your own science. So I'm not going to give my teachers that, your art is not lying in creating the content. It's rather than it's in the delivering of it.
Love that.
That's why my nuance, my personality, and my creativity comes into action. You and I can do identical lessons, and yet I would deliver it with my own style, in my own art. And I might be a better teacher than you are simply because I've got a better art than you.
It's the dynamicness that we're sort of looking for there. Yeah.
And no two people are the same because your personality will come out in the way you teach. But by having the content given to the teachers, by coaching them in a way how it should be taught that is uniform across the school, you're having a very low variance in the classroom. So I had no idea which sounds should I be teaching first, what's the sequence you should follow. So I'm not going to be giving the teachers the autonomy to choose. But as I said, the resources are there. We make the resource. In fact, I do not like it when the teachers just put on the PowerPoint and teach from the PowerPoint. I want them to get understand what is the purpose of the slide, what is the purpose of those words, so they can differentiate in the classroom. That's their art. That's their skill. That's where the experience lies. Okay, this is what this teacher has made in the slide, but that's not what I want to do because the students didn't get this. So how am I going to change this for my class? That's the art, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's not taking a PowerPoint of a phonics lesson and delivering it in with a pace. That's absolutely not what it is.
Absolutely. And I think this leads us really nicely into our takeaways. So, Manisha, each episode, Nathaniel and I will set goals for our own practice around what we've seen in the materials. And it's a really good way of us going back into the classroom and applying some of the things we're learning through our own PL through doing the podcast. So my takeaway is that we have developed a really great set of PowerPoint decks that are very generic around writing that can be adapted for all different departments. We decided to start with professional learning and then roll out the PowerPoints. But I've now decided that they really need to go together because I think teachers need to actually see what this looks like in the classroom. So that's a bit of a change in direction for our writing program, is that I'm going to work with teachers who want to race ahead and start implementing this stuff straight away. And I'm going to help them to tailor it to their particular subject. It's a whole school writing program. And it's really inspired me to help them learn through doing and seeing how it applies, what it's going to look like when it gets in front of students. Nathaniel, what are your takeaways from today?
So my big one, I think, is obviously I'm thinking a lot about pace and responsiveness, and something that I really value. But what I liked about the variations we saw in those clips were that teachers were able to activate different parts of the room at different times and hear different things. So not just having a whole choral reading or just teacher read and tracking, but also front row or left side or right side. You could get half the class or a quarter of the class or a fifth of the class responding and therefore get different things out of it. And the benefits being everyone's ready to respond in different ways, but not always knowing who's going to respond next, which I think keeps that sense of anticipation, which makes the class more exciting, but also gives the teacher different information.
I wanted to say a very big thank you to Manisha for allowing us access to your classroom. And I wanted to invite listeners out there to send us classroom footage with permission, of course, so that we can look inside your classroom. So it's all very constructive, very safe. With Nathaniel and I, we love seeing great practice and we're here to celebrate it. So if you feel like having your practice celebrated, please get in touch with us.